Romans 3:20.
Game over. Game over. Lights out. You've just been completely obliterated publicly. With
Cool.
your wait, you've been folded like a chair caught with your pants down.
Cool.
Right?
Cool story,
When you
bro.
say that God's nature, just saying that God's nature is the good gets you out of the Euthyphro dilemma.
Correct.
How is that any gonna be any different than saying that God's commandments,
It assumes that
which are
it
a part
assumes
of his
that God made
nature, can
commandments.
you shut up? It's already the divine command theorist can just say in virtue of his do things. And
Again,
in
God does
virtue of
not make
those commandments
commandments.
they would be good.
You assume.
Darth, make me mod because you're cutting out, and I can mod him. Too late.
Yeah, look, I see you're
It's a
frustrated. I think
waste of
there's a way to
time.
get through, if not to him,
But
but to other
he's
people.
funny, right? He's funny in the sense that he
He's
gives
very
that
funny.
kind of entertainment.
Yeah.
Oh
I
crap!
don't
Did
think
somebody
he's
kick
following
John
you, though.
down?
You notice when he started spiraling at the end about what like the intentions of the commandments are or something? Like that was hilarious.
Who
Let me have
kicked
a
out
quick go at
John?
it, Sean. If it doesn't work out, I'll
Darth kicked out
throw the
John.
towel in.
What did John do?
What do you think he did?
He was exhausted. His
Made a brilliant claim that scared
He
everybody.
just
Yeah,
implied
that's what he
that
did.
this idiot
Yeah.
implied that you can get out of the Euthyphro dilemma by just saying God's nature is good.
just
And
saying
I
God is the
explained to
say.
him a divine command theorist can just say, right, in virtue of God's nature, because God's nature is the kind of nature which can issue commands to agents, those commandments would be good. So how is his view that God's nature is the good not fall victim to the first horn? It's just fucking pathetic.
You know, I think at this point, every theist on Clubhouse has been kicked out of a room because of the Euthyphro dilemma argument, including me and Matt.
No
Well,
one's ever been kicked
John
out
is
of a room
a special
because of
case.
an
Like
argument.
John is a special case because when he brings up extra level nonsense, like, oh, the good is whatever is congruent with God's nature, and I'm saying, well, if you just want to define good that way, then good is just a tautology, right? God is godly, right? That's the nature of God, right? So it's not really informative what it is you're saying. It's not. You could just say, look, I'm good because I am who I am, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And everyone in this stage would be good because we're all congruent with our own nature, right? There is no evil under that view. If you think
I think
about it,
I
rocks
think
would
that
be good.
I think the argument from evil is just as bad an argument for atheists as the
No,
argument from
that's not
beauty is
true.
for theists.
That's not.
Well, that's obviously we'll defend that.
That's
Defend that claim.
not true. True.
Because
But we
I
weren't
think
even talking. We
the
weren't
best
even
the
talking.
best answer the
Here
best
we go.
answer for the
What
argument.
weren't we talking about?
Can you guys hear my mic?
Oh,
Yeah.
finally,
What's
Welcome.
that? Biscuit
Barely.
Jesus!
talk? What was that? Go on.
I missed that voice of you. That sounded.
Yeah.
Darth,
I'm
let me have a
glad
quick
you're
crack at John,
no
because when
longer
I
dying of
read
COVID.
his
He's no
So
explained
listen.
longer.
it,
He's no longer like disabled.
So you're saying, Darth, that that's not even related to the problem of evil? I mean, obviously it's related.
When did I fucking say that's not related? We were talking about the Euthyphro dilemma, and John, who's just a complete fucking idiot, right, at the highest degree,
Oh, come on.
the most
The
dishonest
most
person in the
dishonest.
Western and Eastern hemisphere, right, is saying
Why do you
that
think he's
Can I just
dishonest?
say?
goodness
I don't
is
think
just
John is dishonest.
congruent
Why is
with
he dishonest?
God. How am I not
Well,
Can
saying
I
he's
just say?
dishonest?
Can I just say?
no. Wait a minute.
Listen,
Darth.
John is one of the most motivated reasoners
Motivated
in either
non-reason.
hemisphere.
Yeah, but look. So you said that we're not. Biscuit said that the problem of evil. Said the same stupid crap John says, right? The problem of evil isn't the problem. So, why are you saying that, Biscuit?
Because, and the thing is, I started listening to like a lot of different answers from the problem of evil, like from William Lane Craig, from Trent Horn, from all these guys. But the best answer I got for the argument from evil actually came from Nietzsche in The Will to Power, where he said it's a problem that is for theists and by theists. Like atheists have no right to posit that evil
That's
even
That's a
exists.
stupid
stupid. It's an
argument.
internal
That's
critique.
a
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
stupid argument. Look,
Hey,
That's
I don't think we should call
Where
it
did
critique.
where did Nietzsche make this
hold on.
argument?
Wait,
Listen,
wait, wait.
listen.
Let
I'll
Dog
explain.
explain. Let Dog.
He makes it on the second and third page of Walter Kaufman text of A Will to Power, where he starts off by saying, "Insofar as we believe in good and evil, we pass sentence on existence." Then he critiques European atheism
Yeah.
for the
Okay.
evil argument.
Look. The point of a problem of evil argument is it's just supposed to show an internal inconsistency in a view of theism, where the theists also posits that there's evil, right? So, like, in theory, the theist, like, you can have a person who believes in like an all-powerful God, but that's not like good, or they could just deny that evil exists, or whatever, right? The point is, the problem of evil is just supposed to show that on versions of theism that posit that evil exists, right, and posit a triomni God, right, you're gonna end up with some kind of contradiction, or at the very least, like, inductively, we can show that it's the probability that that view is correct is very unlikely, right? And so, we should prefer views which either A, deny that evil exists, right, which as a moral anti-realist I'm sympathetic to, or that deny that there's a triomni God, right, which I'm also going to be sympathetic to, right? So that's the point. And when you say, like, well, atheists can't ground their morality or whatever, the point is that, yeah, let's grant that you're correct, but the point is that the theist is the one positing that evil exists, right? If they were to say to the atheist, oh yeah, like, evil is
I
just
don't
like
think
an
that's
illusion or
necessarily the
something.
case.
What do you?
It's
Well,
not
yeah,
it's
I'm
not just
saying
theists that
some.
posit that
Yeah,
evil exists.
I'm saying, yeah, you could have a theist that doesn't posit it, right? Or, but I'm just saying that it's most like Abrahamic religions, right? Do posit some kind of evil in the world, right? Like sin, or something, right? I mean, the issue is that, like, people, like, the concept of God is so ambiguous that people could just redefine words to just mean whatever they want. Like, they could say, oh, by good I just mean, like,
Yeah,
he's consistent with his nature or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
on the
the point
fly.
is, yeah, the point is, yeah, of course you could do that, but the idea is that the problem of evil is supposed to apply to a very particular, um let's say, family of views on what God is like. So if you don't
Okay.
have that view, right, then the argument wouldn't apply. But that's not who the argument is, like, meant for, right? You're just equivocating when you say, like, good or theism, right? Um, and for those views, you would just have other arguments, like auxiliary arguments, to show why they're problematic.
Yeah, Biscuit, I mean, you failed the moment you brought up Nietzsche in an actual philosophical discussion. That's the moment you failed.
Yeah,
Fail?
that's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, that's the moment you
Yeah.
lost all credibility, bro.
How do you fail the conversation? There's a
Yikes.
failure in conversation?
Yeah, I'm joking. Relax.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I failed. I didn't know that it was a test. I would have passed. Damn it.
Yeah, the test is never bring up Nietzsche or Schopenhauer.
Got it. Now
Yeah.
that I know the rules, I'll abide by.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, Mr. House, he talks slow as hell, but what he said was right if you understood it.
No, I did, and yeah, I think that was brought up last time before I was kicked out. It's an internal critique, somebody said to me.
Yeah.
In a very Fiddler on the Roof type
Yeah,
of
that
voice
was
that I
me.
liked.
That's racist.
No, it's not.
Wait, can you rehearse that voice again? I'm trying to guess who it was that
It's
talked
an
to him.
internal critique.
It was Venus.
Was it?
Yeah.
You don't understand, Biscuit.
Yeah, I
It's an
guess Venus.
No,
internal
Venus
critique.
doesn't sound anything like this.
Yeah, no, that sounds like an old Arab dad from like Onage
Yeah.
Pranks. I don't know.
Exactly.
Hey, Sean, you got the reference? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the argument from evil sucks.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but why?
Why?
Because you go into the argument, and maybe this is just. I mean, I'm not the smartest crayon in the box. Everyone in here knows that.
Hold on. First of all, did you understand what Dog just explained to you? How the
Certainly,
argument
yeah,
is
and I
meant
think
to
he
go
understood.
through? Okay,
Yeah.
so then do you accept that the argument is a powerful critique of that
Hell no,
There's a
it's
better
terrible.
question. There's a better
family
question.
of theistic
Well,
beliefs?
okay,
Okay, well then
so
you're just an
what's
idiot.
Sean,
Because he already
what's the
explained why it
problem
is.
with it?
No, listen. There's a better question to be asked.
And
right?
if you
Biscuit.
wait, stop. If you equivocate, right? If you equivocate on any of these definitions, you try to like redefine these terms on the fly, then your argument's just going to be thrown out the window because this is a particular critique to a particular family of beliefs.
You are throwing an argument out of the window.
So make the argument, all right? And if you equivocate, I'm just gonna mute you.
Make what argument? I didn't. What are you talking about?
The argument that the problem of evil fails.
What problem do you?
No, I didn't say that it
have?
fails. I said that it sucks.
What?
I didn't have like a.
Are you
Well, wait a
equivocating on
minute.
the?
But if an
what do you mean by
argument,
sucks?
I didn't
but
have
presumably if an argument,
wait a minute. A ready Aristotelian syllogism for why
wait a
it
minute,
sucks.
wait a minute. But presumably, if an argument succeeds in lowering the probability of theism, right? Then it's a good argument, right?
That's kind of circular.
How's that circular?
How's that circular?
It's circular because you're presuming any argument that ends the way that I want it to is a good argument because it ended the way that I wanted it to.
No, but look, the point is it's a good argument in virtue of the fact that it lowers the probability of theism.
Right, you're presuming the goodness of that result.
Okay, so you don't think that that's what is conventionally meant by a good argument?
No, I think a good argument is an argument which has followed through logically and reasonably. Not one
Okay,
that
and
to a particular
do you think?
conclusion.
Wait a minute.
Like I could
And do you think in order?
the existence of God,
Wait a
I
minute.
wouldn't
And
like
do you
the
think?
argument.
Right. And you think that in order to lower the epistemic probability of something, right? In order for an argument to successfully show that it needs to be logical.
Yes.
Right. So there would be a good argument by your criteria.
If it were logical, yes.
Right. And if it's successful, then it's logical.
No, that's incorrect.
Well, how can
some
an
arguments
illogical
are
argument
successful because of persuasion and oratory skill
No.
rather than the
I'm not
logic of
saying. No, you're confused. I'm not saying successful in persuading people. I'm saying successful in
being logical.
Well, it's not just being logical, right? The point is you're following certain epistemic conventions, right? And if you correctly follow them, and the end result is that, given those rules or those conventions, the person ought to reject theism, right? Or at the very least, lower the
conclusion of the reasonable argument. I agree with that. Any reasonable argument followed through and analyzed critically, one should accept the conclusion regardless of what it is.
Right. So that's all I mean by successful, like what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that it's successful at all. How is it? And maybe I missed the laying out of the argument earlier, because I just joined the room when someone was
Wait, but before you said it, you weren't saying that it wasn't successful.
I wasn't saying that it wasn't successful. I was just saying it sucked. I didn't.
Right.
You're
So
saying
in
the
virtue,
argument sucks or the existence of evil sucks.
I was saying the argument strikes me with underwhelming force. It's a subjective
Ah,
opinion.
okay.
Yeah,
What
Well,
that's
what do
all.
how
you
is it
see
a
as
subjective
faulty in the
opinion?
reasoning of the argument? Not just like your sense of, it's kind of a
Well,
dumb argument.
Yeah,
look,
I
when
have to
when
step
someone
away for a
presents the
second. So I'm gonna empower. Should I empower Dog or should I empower Daniel? Are you
yeah,
there, guys?
empower me, please.
Power to the
Please, I'm
dog.
tired of being
We
abused
already
by
gave that.
The
mods.
power of the dog. Isn't that a movie
Okay.
that's gonna get like an Oscar or something?
Yeah, so look,
we're all being muted.
Biscuit, do you think that where do you think the argument fails?
Well, you
Right.
haven't.
Good
I mean,
question.
you haven't presented your form of it. I mean, the argument from evil comes in
Well,
several forms.
do you think that there's no version of the argument that's successful?
No, I don't.
There you go.
Okay, here's an argument, right? Let's say that you posited, right,
The
that
existence of a triomni God.
yeah,
Go for it.
Okay.
but not furthermore, triomni God who's rational, right? I mean, I think that should go without saying that he would be
No, it
perfectly
doesn't.
rational.
It doesn't go without saying, because I don't believe that about the God of the Bible. I think that
Wait, you
the
don't think the
laws of
God of the
the
Bible is rational? Wait, but how can you be perfectly
no.
good without being rational?
Good question.
I think that you can be perfectly rational without being good. I don't. I mean, goodness is a little bit more subjective than rationality. But I would
Wait, do you
assume that
think
the
that the God
Nazis.
of the Bible is good?
I do.
All right.
Yeah,
Do you
but
think that he could
but
do
I know
anything?
that you can be simultaneously evil and rational. That's possible.
Sure,
Do you
but I'm
think that
saying,
about the God of
well,
the Bible?
not if
No.
you believe. Well, not. Well, see, you actually can't if you take that what's good gives you a reason to do something. So if something is good, it gives you a reason to do something. Then, in that case, you actually have to be perfectly good if you're perfectly rational, right? One entails the other.
Right. We would think that a good thing would also fit within the laws of logic and rationality.
Yeah, no, I think that the Nazi Germans, for instance, were very rational, but they were very evil at the
No,
same
See,
but
I
time.
would
look,
disagree. I would
no,
say
no,
they
no.
made
But look,
several
you're
egregious errors in judgment.
yeah. Well, right. So look, the point
An
is,
error
you're
in judgment doesn't imply irrationality, though, necessarily. It
no,
can
no,
be
no,
There's
no.
just
But
there's
that
irrationality
actually
somewhere in their
does.
chain of
That
reasoning.
actually
Yeah.
does, right? What do we mean
There's a
by
premise,
perfect?
false
Look, what
premises.
do we mean by perfectly rational? By perfectly rational, we mean someone who never fails, right, to reason correctly or to be in accordance with both practical and epistemic reason, right? So, what does that mean? It means um, whatever you have the most reason to believe or to do, you always do that, right?
Right, but if I were to take two people and say I'm going to mate these two people because I want to generate an outcome in the offspring, I've done something very evil in deciding
Right,
to
and I'll
force two people to
yeah,
mate.
and I'll
But hang
explain.
on, wait. I'm just
Well,
going to
no, they
land by
might be
saying
into
it.
it.
I'm just going to land by saying it's still a rational assumption that the outcome will be the outcome that I desire. So I've done something both rational and evil. It's
r-
possible.
Yeah, but okay, but
But there's a mistaken
because that
premise in
only
your
that
reasoning.
only takes into account hypothetical imperatives.
No, that
But you
actually
also
happened. That's not a hypothetical.
no, you know what a hypothetical imperative is. Have you
The
ever heard of
hypothetical
Kant?
imperative means to set a goal, and then
That's
reaching that
right.
goal is, yeah,
Yeah,
that's David Hume.
so I'm saying that you're only taking into account someone acting on never being out of accord with hypothetical norms. But the point is that if you believe there are categorical norms, right? Or if uh similar to um
Are we still on the
let's
argument from
say
evil? Because I wanted to get into that. Is this
well,
a
this
premise
is
to like the
relevant.
argument of evil?
Well,
Okay.
this is relevant, yeah. If you believe in either a categorical norms or you believe that there are there's for example a being like God, right, who's because he's good always desires what's good or always desires, you know, certain kinds of outcomes, right? The point is that if that agent fails to either a act in accordance with categorical norms or fails to act in accordance with um whatever is good, right? If he fails to desire what's good, in the case of like God, right? Then they're not being rational because they're not doing something they have most reason to do, right? Does that make sense?
No, not exactly. I don't think that the God of the Bible is a completely rational figure. But I think that that doesn't have anything to do with the goodness thereof. But I mean, if that really matters, if that matters in order to get your primacy started,
Well, okay. Here's the question,
because I mean,
right?
I don't think that the burning bush or the walking on water, none of those things are rational.
Well, why is that
So
irrational?
it's irrational to walk on water because you can't be both more dense and less dense than water simultaneously.
What?
That's the
But it's
nature.
not irrational.
That's the nature of
How's that irrational?
So then just say
because
that
it
he was less
violates the
dense
law of
than
non
water,
it violates the law of non-contradiction. What do you mean it's not
What do you?
it's not it's
No,
not
it
Couldn't you just
rational?
does.
say he was less dense than water?
The point is that
Well, he would
it's a
also be
miracle.
more dense because he's a
He
man.
just like changed the properties of either the water he was walking on or
That's not
himself.
implied. That's not
What do you mean
implied in the
it's not
text.
implied?
It's so
Well,
what the text
we can
implies is that this
infer.
is a divine
Well,
miracle. You can't
well,
just
you're
put
right,
science
but the
into it
point is, why would we think that it's a contradiction?
He means
because that's what a supernatural act is. It's beyond the
Yeah,
functional
well,
capacity of a natural cause.
I mean, it just there's like all kinds of nonsense in what you just said, right?
That a miracle is beyond the
Like
capacity of a natural cause is nonsense. That's what it's
a
been thought
mir
of for
no, no,
thousands of
no, no,
years.
that a miracle that no. What's nonsense is that what you're saying, you think that entails a contradiction, right?
So, Mr. Dog, you need to ask him about his modality. I think he's talking about physically impossible, not necessarily logically.
If you're saying if it's contradicting the laws of nature, I'm not
I
even.
have an example you
I
could
mean,
use for
maybe.
Biscuit. Biscuit, you could use the Trinity. I mean, most people say that's illogical, and yet it's clearly taught in Scripture.
Yeah, I would say it's illogical. 1 does not equal 3.
That would
2
support
e.g.
what Biscuit is
false.
saying, though.
If you want to use that, MR, I mean, I don't know how many. I can give you tons of the burning bush that's not burning. The Hebrew says it was burning with fire, and Moses stepped aside to see why
Well,
it was
look,
not
the
burning.
point is,
Said it was burning
So
but not being
if you're
consumed.
just gonna
but burning
look,
means to consume. That's what it means to burn.
accept
So I
that
think that would imply a
God,
contradiction also.
That's not a
if you
contradiction.
just,
That could just be a change in the laws of nature.
well, that's what
Right, but
I
A
then
was
that would
saying.
imply something
contradiction
that
is
would
like a
imply
square
something that's
circle.
not inferred by the
Two things
scripture.
that can't mutually exist at the same time in the same place. A square and a circle cannot be the same figure. Right? That's
Right,
a
that would mean
contradiction.
that
If you
look
saw that,
a
your
contradiction is when
mind is
something is
broken.
both A and non-A simultaneously and in the same relationship. So if something is burning and not burning simultaneously, that's a contradiction.
Okay, well,
A thing being on fire
I've
does
had
not
this
mean that it's also being
conversation
consumed.
before.
And even so, like a thing could be lit on
Look,
fire and not be consumed.
look,
If you
I've
look
had
up
this
Candle.
conversation with Biscuit
if you look up
before.
on
It's a
fire,
waste
it
of
means
time.
burning. It is a waste of time. I agree. We can agree to disagree that on fire means burning, but I think it does. I think it tends to.
I think Christianity has trained you to be a little more accommodating of contradictions than you should be.
No, that's not Christianity. That's just philosophy. I haven't gotten into Christianity quite yet.
You did. You were talking about the Trinity, and you were using as a reference the
I've got
burning
the
bush, which I
Trinity.
don't think most people would
The
say
Trinity,
is a like
the Trinity
categorical
was brought up.
contradiction in
The
the way that
Trinity
you
But
was
want to
brought up by
see,
believe.
Matt.
out of
The Trinity was brought up by Matt, not me.
all the arguments that
Yeah, and you responded with the burning bush.
philosophers have given for accepting contradictions, appealing to like religion or like the Bible is like the worst. Like, why wouldn't you just deny the Bible? Like, why would you accept the contradiction?
Right.
So
You use logic
hold
for
on, wait,
every
Mister,
other area of your
Mister.
life except for this
I
one.
can answer that question. I can answer that question. But is this upsetting the problem from evil? What is this the reason we haven't got there yet? Because I need to accept
Yeah.
John's
Because if
premise.
you're just saying
Yeah, you're
I'll
denying
accept any
logic. You can't just
Well, hang on.
you
contradictions.
deny logic.
If
Can one person talk at a time?
We can't
Yeah, if you're
discuss
just saying,
any.
hold on.
I can't hear
If you're
anyone. Okay, go
saying,
ahead, Mister.
if you're just saying, oh well, it doesn't matter what the Bible says. I'll accept anything, even if it's contradictory. Then yeah, you'll just say, well, yeah,
No. I didn't say I'll accept it. When did I say that? I just said that there are contradictions in the text. That's not controversial.
Oh no. But I'm saying if you think, no. But look, if you think that those contradictions actually happened, right? If you're like willing to accept that there are true contradictions simply because like the Bible said
No,
so.
no, 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 no. I don't think that I would immediately suggest that they actually happened. I think that that's entirely beside the point.
Oh, okay, okay. I was just
Yeah. So what
confused.
I think is that the Hebrews in the Bible were talking about a God who they presumed was ineffable, or that you can't contain this idea in your brain. God can't be boxed in, and so God presented Himself in those ancient myths as this figure who was burning and not burning, walking on water, talking through a donkey, things which were
Do you think
ineffable.
he's all good?
And that's how. Yeah, I think God is all good.
Okay, what does it mean for him to be all good?
It means for there to be within Him no flaw in moral judgment.
Mm-hmm. So
Would that be
if
clear?
Right. So
there's no flaw in his moral judgment, then would you agree that he always seeks to do what ought to occur?
Yes,
Mm-hmm. So why would he actualize a world that contains things which are evil, if evil is that
because
which ought not to occur?
he thought that world ought to occur.
Yeah, but if he's
yeah,
if
but
he's
see
actualizing
what
a
you're really
world,
saying. Hold on. What you're really saying is just that like sin ought to occur, like evil ought to occur.
if he
No,
actually
a world where evil is possible ought to occur. God
Wait
thought
a
a
minute.
world that where evil is possible ought to occur. Apparently, because it does.
well, if he
Well, when you say
permits evil,
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. But when you say possible, what do you mean? Do you just mean like logically possible?
In every way possible. I think that
You mean
Yeah,
we're
like
no, I think his
neurologically?
point is well
I think
made.
we're totally free to commit acts of evil, and God
Right.
thought
Right.
though that the evil
So
should not occur.
yeah, but
A
that
world
right.
where evil is
defeats
So
the
possible ought to
argument.
occur.
wait a minute. Hold on. But see, the issue with this kind of response, right, is that why? How should I put this? If by definition sin is something evil and sin ought not to occur, people ought not sin,
Right.
right? Then allowing the possibility of sin is simply um, just allowing the possibility that your um, creation can fail to be good, right?
But that ought not only exist if they can. You can only have an ought not if it's a possibility, right? So they ought not sin because it's possible to sin. If it were impossible to sin, there goes the
That
ought not,
doesn't
and the
matter.
ought for that matter.
Wait,
Look,
why?
if he
I don't understand.
creates agents, right, that have the possibility for failure, and you're saying that he permits that, it implies that if he is all good, right, and all powerful, but somehow you think that he can permit that his creation can be morally imperfect, it
Yeah.
implies that God just wants those things to occur,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
right?
disagree.
Well,
God
it
I
would
disagree.
imply that he
wants his
doesn't. No, no.
creation.
It would imply that
He wants
he
you guys to
doesn't.
choose to grow up.
Yeah, God
Well,
wants
no.
people
It
to choose. I
implies
agree with
that
Michael.
it doesn't imply that he wants them to occur. It just implies that he doesn't want them to not occur. Right.
Meaning he's willing to allow you to make bad choices if it means you are a creation
Well, the
that
idea.
can and in
Well,
fact
look.
does choose to be better.
Right.
But if he's all good, then he seeks to maximize the best of
Right,
all
but
possible
but look.
worlds.
But
Apparently
wait
his
a minute.
The
But
best
interpretation
of
wait
of
a
all
his
minute. Look.
goodness
possible
is different than
worlds
your
doesn't
interpretation of his goodness.
contain
You think he could do
actions
a
which
better
ought
job.
not
How
to
do
I
you,
don't know.
how
He
do
occur
you
likes the
know
job
that?
he did.
in the first
How do you
place.
know that? How do you know that, Darth? That the best of all
Because what
possible
else
They
worlds
does
couldn't
it
answer
mean
that
to say that
question.
he's all good?
Because he
That's
doesn't have
what
a
we've
million
been
dollars.
asking you.
If he had $1 million, then
No,
that
but
would
yeah, I
prove
mean,
that
I
God's
think
good.
you just made a claim, Darth, that
No,
needs to be
that's
justified.
misunderstanding. Yeah, look
Who's
How do you justify that claim?
What Darth Arianus is saying, right, is that God being good, right, wants to create the best possible world, or a world where uh you don't have to say the best possible one, but just, if you think there are multiple best possible worlds, right, or multiple perfect worlds possible, right, then he would want to actualize one of them, right? And if sin or evil ought not occur, right, and he's creating a world where that is nomologically possible, right? Where agents could just like randomly choose to sin, right? The idea is that that's not a perfect world because it could fail, right? It could fail to be a perfect world, right?
God never created the world perfect. He made it good, full of good
Well,
creatures that were capable of doing good and evil. If the
Good
world would have
point.
been
Okay, so
perfect,
then
or if
he isn't all good.
people would have been perfect, we would have been God.
Okay, so then he isn't all good.
He
well,
definitely doesn't
no,
live
but
up to
I'm
That
the
just
doesn't
worst
that
saying
things
doesn't
of
the
all
follow.
time.
best
That's why
possible world
this
for
argument sucks so bad. It's like
Well,
this
you
is going
haven't
no,
nowhere.
no,
given
Yeah,
a
you're
no.
basically just
coherent
You're
response every
misunderstanding.
saying,
time
I
we
want a
ask
tree
you
made of marshmallows. You
to
don't get a tree
show
made of marshmallows. You get a
that
tree made
good
out of
I
Like,
think
that
the
wood.
God.
argument
I'm
sucks.
just gonna mute this idiot. If God is all good, right? What would it mean if by all good He doesn't actualize the best of all possible worlds? That's
It
what we've been asking you,
it means
right?
that he
But you
it means
haven't
that he
given,
wants.
just saying that there's
How
a
do you know that it? How
possibility
do you know
for
that he
agents
hasn't?
to do
That's
what
what's so
ought not
strange.
to occur.
How do
Can you
you know
stop
no,
that
no,
he
over
no.
hasn't?
Because
talking me?
we're explaining it to you, right? If
Well, I mean,
sin is
there's
something,
two people talking. There needs
look,
to be just one.
If sin
look.
shouldn't happen and God actualizes a world with sin, how could He be actualizing the best of all possible worlds?
Because the best of all possible worlds is a world in which people freely choose to sin or to not sin. To do the ought not or to do the
So,
ought
the
is the
best
best
of all
possible world.
possible worlds is a world where things ought not to occur,
Absolutely.
given that
And
there's evil?
how
How does that
yes.
make any sense?
How does it make
If
how does
it's
it
a,
what
look,
do you mean how does it make
I
sense?
think
look,
Well,
if it's
look.
the
very
best of
good
all
sense.
possible
Let's
worlds, it
just
would
World
be
let's wait,
morally
where
hold
there
on,
are
hold
free
on.
perfect.
creatures, it makes total
Let's
sense that the
just
best of all. And
no,
who
that
thinks
doesn't make
beauty?
any sense. Look, that doesn't make any sense. But look,
I'm sorry you don't think it
um,
makes sense, but tell me a law of logic that it violates. Don't tell me that it
yeah,
doesn't make
sure.
sense. That's
So
subjective.
if presumably you're saying that if creatures' actions are indeterministic, such that they could either um will evil or will good, right? That's a better world because it allows for like free will, right?
Right. I
Yeah,
think
but
people think it's
we
better,
have to
it's morally better
understand.
to be free.
But the problem is, okay, but here's one issue, right? The idea of like libertarian free will is just incoherent, right? Because what people want to say is that, like proponents of the view, is that if God like, determined you to do good, right, then you couldn't really have control, some kind of quote unquote control, like ultimate responsibility, moral and otherwise, for your actions because prior causes, right, is what entail your decisions, right, as opposed to um, some indeterministic facts in your conscious mind,
Are
right?
you bringing naturalism or
Um,
materialism into
but
the scenario?
no, no,
No?
no, 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 no. But the issue was that is that on libertarian free will, when the agent makes a choice, he just ends up acting randomly, right? So all they've really done is just insert some kind of randomness into the agent's decision making process, right? But why would stochastic reasoning process be any more free than one that is determined by by antecedent conditions,
Hmm.
right? The only difference here, right, is that it is determined to some degree, but at some point you just have some random indeterministic event or cause, right, which leads to the agent um acting out of accord with what they best have reason to do, right? But how does that make the agent any more free? If anything, it's a restriction on the agent's freedom, right? It's like if you had a mechanism, right, which you could have one scenario in which a mechanism works as it should, right? Meaning it's determined to work properly and fulfill its function, and another mechanism, right, where there's a kink in it that causes it to spontaneously fail on occasion, right? The point is clearly one of those mechanisms is going to be considered better than the other, right? And in the case of agents, right, um, the way we uh, exhibit our agency, right, is by reasoning and deliberating, and try and attempting to be in accord with what we have best reason to do, right, to be rational, right. But in the case of libertarian free will, you're really just um making the agents such that they're necessarily going to be irrational at some point, right? If there's a non-zero probability that they're gonna do otherwise at some point, then
That that was a I mean that was a really long statement. I think I caught the gist of what you were trying to say. I think the difference between libertarian free will and determinism at the end of the day, or between determinism and dualism interactionism, is that one of them effectually destroys the is-ought distinction. So in
What?
determinism, there's no
What?
difference between what in determinism there's no difference between what is and what ought to be done, right? Because if you're
yeah. So
determined to
I'll explain why that's wrong, right? So you're saying there can't be an ought without the possibility of you doing otherwise, but we have to be clear on what possibility here means, right? It oughts don't wouldn't make sense if there was no logical or metaphysical possibility of you doing otherwise, right? I agree with that, that in a scenario where um there's no logically possible scenario, or I mean, even metaphysically, I think it's questionable, right? For you to do otherwise, then yeah, of course, the ought would sort of be like incoherent, right? It's like somebody said, "You ought not draw square circles," right? It's nonsensical, right? But the point is that, um, in a deterministic scenario, right? Um, the way that reasons would work with agents, right, is that when the agent is at an impasse, right, um there are um two logical possibilities, right? Or let's put it this way, there are two possibilities, uh, where if they had one desire, right, or if they had one intention, it would produce outcome A, and if they had another intention, it will produce outcome B. And the point is, the agent can deliberate, right, and act on that reason, act on that ought, right? Even if it's the case that um their actions were predetermined by antecedent conditions, because the idea is that it's still conceivable to the agent that they could have done otherwise, right? Even though they know that ultimately, nomologically, it's impossible, right? The point is, they know that logically it's possible, right? Or epistemically or you could say it's generally like physically possible, right? Like physiologically possible, right? So for example, it's possible, um uh for um planet Earth to have been, uh let's say, like smaller in size, right? Like physically there's no law that says that the planet Earth had to be a certain size in nature. But the point is that you're correct in saying that, once you include all of the antecedent conditions, you're going to realize that that's nomologically impossible. But the point
right.
is, in the case of the agent, they it's still epistemically and logically possible, right? And I guess like broadly physically possible that they do otherwise, right? And so for that reason, the auth is going to be still coherent, right? Because you can imagine a scenario where the agent didn't hear the ought, right? They didn't realize there was this ought, and they acted differently, right? Because um, ultimately, um, knowing about that reason does influence their actions, right? And so, had they not known about the ought, right, they would have done otherwise, right?
Yeah, but I don't even, if you even grant his, what he's saying, right? Earlier what he said was just hilarious, right? How does free will get you out of the problem of evil?
Oh no, I didn't say free will gets you out of the problem of
But
evil. I
do,
think that it grants you the isot
but do
distinction.
you but do you under wait?
Darth,
But do you
I think that
understand?
your multiple universe or possible worlds hypothesis just totally fails. It's totally bunk. Like
How is
the
it
idea,
Why?
totally okay? Show me an
the idea
argument.
of
Show me an argument
the
that
idea
show.
of
Okay,
forgiveness, right? Forgiveness, compassion, and sympathy. Just to pull something out, like three terms out of my butt. Those three things wouldn't exist without evil. If you think about it, forgiveness
no,
wouldn't
that's
exist
that.
without evil.
What?
What would you
What?
need to forgive someone for?
Okay, so what's preventing God from actualizing a world where there's forgiveness, compassion, and the other thing that you said, and evil doesn't exist? What would
Because
prevent him from doing
there'd
that?
be nothing
If
to
it's
forgive.
logically,
There'd be nothing to be sympathetic toward.
I have a
What would there be to
question.
that doesn't
forgive if there was
follow.
no
You could
wrong done?
be no, you could just be sympathetic to only doing
Does
good
he think
deeds,
God has
right?
those properties?
Yeah. So
Of course, the biblical
how
God has
can
those
God
properties.
be
Haven't you
those
read the
Wait,
Bible?
things
Where am
wait,
I?
without
no, but
evil?
the problem is then, how is it that are you saying that the creation was necessary then?
The universe was necessary?
Yeah, that God had to create in order for compassion to be manifested.
Sure. Yeah,
So
I
God
don't
didn't
think that
have a
there was
choice.
compassion
God
before.
didn't have a choice not to create the world, in other words.
No, that's well. God didn't have to manifest compassion, but I think He desired to.
No, I'm asking whether he was obligated to.
No, where would that ever? From where would that obligation
Well,
stem?
wait a
Okay, so
minute,
then he
because
And
didn't
by the
have to
way,
create.
dog, while you pursue this, same thing is going to arise with respect to heaven. So you're gonna want to bring that up.
oh yeah, that's a good point. Is that presumably there's no forgiveness for sin in heaven, right?
Somehow
So
he's
There's no
able to
forgiveness for
actualize that
sin in
world.
heaven.
yeah, like once you go to heaven, there's no not of sin, but just forgiveness in general in
Heaven is
heaven
not a
because
place
nobody
you can
does
go.
anything wrong.
Heaven is not a place you can go. I'm a Christian mystic, by the way. Heaven is among us.
Nobody
Heaven is within
cares.
us.
That's
Is
just
within us.
gibberish. That's just gibberish.
I don't care what you say, Sean. If you're going to say what you just said was gibberish, it wasn't pertinent at all. Like most of the things you say during these arguments. But forgiveness, compassion, and sympathy aren't possible without the possibility of evil. And so possibly,
Okay,
and the thing is,
what's
I don't know how God
preventing
thinks.
God from actualizing a world where those three properties exist, but there's no evil?
Because
What's
those three
preventing him?
properties can't exist without evil.
That's just restating the claim. I'm asking for the argument.
I've given it to
Yeah,
you. What
but
is
the
forgiveness?
issue is
Yeah,
I'm
that's
trying to
the
Forgiveness.
claim. What's
understand.
the
No,
fucking argument?
but the thing that we're trying to understand is whether God was
I
free
think a lot
not
of
to,
people beside you, Darth,
whether God
understand the
is
argument.
Give me the
free.
fucking
The
argument.
issue, what the issue is, whether God is free not to create the world, whether he was
I
obligated to
believe God was
create it.
free
Look,
not to create the
he
world.
made
Yeah,
a
but you're just
claim.
being
He
inconsistent there.
made Jack. He made a
No, no, but
claim that
but
those
leave
properties
that
are
point,
impossible.
aside, right? He wants to say that it's better that there be compassion than not be compassion, but yet God was free not to create the world. Do you see
Well,
the
Well, yeah,
inconsistency?
then
Darth
you
wanted.
have to say that it's not necessary, even though God is necessarily good. It's not necessary that He always actualize a world that's good, right?
I don't think that Darth understands the concept of forgiveness. So I'll read the definition here.
No,
Forgiveness is the intentional
This
and
is irrelevant.
That's irrelevant to the
That's
point we're
totally
making
irrelevant.
now.
Darth
Look,
asked
we
Yeah,
me this
yeah,
understand what
question. How would
forgiveness
yeah.
is, right?
We can grant
but Darth said he
that
didn't. He
evil
asked
is
me this
required.
question.
That's fine. We
No,
can
he said your
grant
argument was incoherent.
that compassion, etc., forgiveness, whatever, those things require evil for their existence. We could grant that, right? The problem is you're being inconsistent. If you think those things are required for goodness, right, and yet God was free not to create the world.
Yeah,
That's the
and
point.
at this point, Jack, with respect to you and everyone else in the room here, I'm arguing with three people, and I'm being muted by most of them. So, I mean, with respect, I just think this argument sucks, and
Yeah,
I'll
but
Okay, just stay on
that's
topic.
the inconsistency, right? That we want you to address. So whenever you feel like you're comfortable having that discussion,
No,
right?
I've been comfortable the whole time. I just think this
Yeah.
is one of the bad arguments. There's some good ones. I just think
Look,
this
You
is
I
one of
don't
them.
haven't
give a
given
fuck.
any
I don't
coherent
give a
reason.
fuck. I don't give a fuck if you think it's a bad argument or not. I want you to address it.
I'm
If you
not
don't want to
going to.
address it
I'm
now,
not going to
good, then
address
don't
anything.
address it. Fine. We don't care
Okay, bye
about your
bye.
opinion. We don't care about your opinion on whether you think it's a good argument or not.
I love how recently Jack has been like, on a streak with these, being angry at these theists. It's pretty funny.
I mean, Jack was literally so
Yeah.
nice just
Hey
now,
guys,
and Biscuit didn't even want to
hey
I think
guys,
the
if
He
I
issue
never
was
is
answered one thing that I said. All I
like
said,
like Biscuit's behavior is just depressing. Like, really, that's what how you want to say it? You want to just say, I don't like the argument. I don't like the argument. I don't like the.
so. I think like it's sort
you
of
guys
unfair a
said
little bit
one
because
was ready to
three
have
people
a
were addressing him.
conversation,
Hang on. So three people were addressing him and objecting to him, and he wasn't allowed the enough
Look,
time.
you
Especially
understand the objection that I just posed, right?
correct.
Okay.
I understand it.
So if he doesn't feel comfortable because, there's too many people talking right now, he can come back and address that argument at some other time, right? Him saying that he thinks is a bad argument is just him being a fucking bitch, right?
Okay,
Damn.
but
We don't give a
what
fuck about
And
what he
refusing to stay
thinks,
on
right?
topic.
If he
Jack
wants to
Jack is
say,
savage.
oh, I think there's a way to answer that argument, and I'll do it at another time when I'm more comfortable, that's fine, right? Him saying that it's a bad argument, but I'm not going to tell you what's wrong with it, is just him being a fucking bitch, right?
no, I
And the thing
understand.
is, the thing you have to understand about this guy is that this is a pattern with him, right? Ever since the first day I got here, he would shoot his mouth off about stuff that he knows nothing about, right?
Nietzsche.
He's just a
Can
fucking.
I ask something? I just want to make sure I understood the where you arrived with Biscuit because I think I had it all the way up until what you were asking him to try to demonstrate
Yeah,
in the
right.
argument.
So the idea is that earlier in the conversation, he said that God never fails to have, because he's good, he never fails to have the correct moral judgment, right? And I said, well, do you think that he would actualize like the best possible state of affairs, right? Or the best possible states, like one of the, if he thinks there are multiple best possible worlds, right? Um, so, um, so then he said, well, we're like, okay, so why is there like sin? Like, how could this be the best possible world if, by definition, sin is something that ought not occur, and it's occurring in the best possible world? Well, if there was a world without sin, presumably that would be a better world, right? So God would be, should actualize that world, right? And he said he sort of agreed with the concept that God actualizes the best possible world, and said that this might be the best possible world, and pointed to the fact that without sin you couldn't have things like forgiveness and compassion, which make the world better. Then the sin decreases its moral uh, value, right? So then Jack pointed out, well, wait a minute, so then do you believe that God had to create, right, since he has to actualize the best possible world, and that includes a world in which there is a sin and forgiveness and compassion? Did God have to create um that world, or could he have abstained from creating and not created any world, right? Does he have the free will to choose that, right? Because earlier he was
So can I
talking
pick it
about
up? Can
free
I try
will.
to pick? Can I try to pick it up there?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll be any more successful. I think I align with Biscuit quite a bit, but I'm curious to see where this takes me. So ask me those questions again. Could God have created? The questions are: could God have created a different world than this, or not a world at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So then, do you disagree that he um because he's good, he actualizes the best possible world necessarily?
Yes.
Right. So in a scenario where he didn't actualize the best possible world, would that be a better outcome, like a better decision, morally speaking, or like would it be the same? Would it be like morally
How do we
equivalent?
evaluate? I don't know if this is relevant, but how do we evaluate best possible world?
Well, best possible. I'm just leaving it open to sort of
Fine.
interpretation.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, let me rephrase. Let me make sure I'm tracking. If the world that was created was not the best possible world, does that call into question God's moral?
Yeah, that's right.
What would you call it? The will? I don't know what you would even
Yeah,
call it. Does
moral
that? But
character. Yeah.
okay, great. Does that call into care? It's a very good question. I think my gut answer is not necessarily, but I'm not sure I can say why.
Well, what if he just didn't create anything?
Then there would just be God.
But do you think that that would call into question his moral character?
I don't think God's moral character, anyone's moral character, I think, is only exercised in relationship to a something. And I think the thing could be itself. I think there's a way to act morally towards oneself. But that's still a kind of relationship. That's not it's not reflexive, right? There's a kind of two parties in that case. So I think even if God didn't exist, even if God didn't create a universe, you could still claim God's moral character because God could contemplate God's self and thereby sort of create some kind of internal relationship or something. But there would be no human experience of God's morality because it stays of God's moral character because it only stays in the realm of where God is.
Wait, but do you think that God could have created any possible world, like given his
Yes,
moral character?
right. This is the question of
I'm not saying
is
if he has
God
the
right? In
ability
other words,
to.
this is everything that God does good, or is everything good because God does it? Right. That's this question.
No.
Well, yeah.
Well,
No.
It kind of implies it, but yeah.
Okay. I'm thanks for your patience. I'm trying to. You guys are way better at philosophy than me, so I'm trying to get it. So the question is can if God could have created any number of possible worlds, do any of them, considering that they wouldn't be of the same moral goodness, would that impugn God's moral character, given God's capability to do so?
Yeah.
My gut answer is no, but I don't think I can tell you in an argument. I don't know why no, but I think that's where I'm inclined to say. I'm just not sure how to get there
Yeah, well,
in the
see,
syllogism.
the thing with Biscuit is that he seemed to at first agree that yeah, like God does have to create certain kinds of worlds, right? But then when Jack asked, well, what if God chose not to create, right? Um, the entailment being that if he says, yeah, that would be not a problem, then as it turns out, God doesn't have to create um a world where there's compassion and forgiveness and whatever else Biscuit said, right? Then um well then the idea is that Biscuit would be being like inconsistent with what he said before about God having to create such a world.
What if I said something like, in order to create this human world, right? And I think Biscuit was trying to get at this, right? This world that we experience requires the presence of things like evil and sin and cancer. Otherwise, it's not this world, it's some other world.
Yeah, but somebody could just say, well, why did God actualize this world as opposed to um some other world, right?
Because this is the only world in which this is the only world in which sort of the pairs make any sense, right? In other words, if there's, I think Biscuit was trying this one too, right? If there's no sin, concept of forgiveness is incomprehensible.
Well, then that's what Jack was saying, is that how can God have forgiveness without creating the world?
Right. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Well, you're
Yeah, it's
saying that
very
if he
interesting.
creates, are you saying if he creates a world, this is the attributes they have to have, but he could also choose not to create the world?
It would be a different world. In other words, in order to create a world that functions the way our world works, it has to have certain rules of it. A world that functions in other ways would be composed differently.
Right, but that's so what? So it's just some other
Yeah, okay,
logically
No.
that's fine.
possible world.
No, no, I hear that, right? It's interesting. I'm having a small conversation with a friend on Facebook about um, does God want to forgive or something like that? Does God, no. Does God ever apologize? That was such a great question, I thought. Does God ever apologize? And what would that do? And he has a reading of some of Jewish liturgy, at least, that kind of suggests that there's a hidden notion here that God wants to apologize to us for putting us in a world that's so clunky and full of suffering and pain. And now that's an interesting kind of a God, right? The God that wants to apologize to us for creating us.
Maybe.
Well,
That's like theologically interesting, I mean.
um, well, see, there's gonna be, well, see, I think you could take the problem of evil argument even like a layer deeper by appealing. So if I think most classical and neoclassical theists would agree that God is perfectly rational because they think he made humans in his image and humans are rational. So given that God is more perfect than humans, he would be perfectly rational, right? He would exhibit rationality to the highest degree possible, right? And given that, he would always be in accord with hypothetical imperatives, right? So if he has a desire, he will always be in accord with that desire, right? And given that he knows the entailments of all his desires because he's omniscient, right? He can't desire something contradictory, right? Because that would imply that he thinks such a world. Well, I mean, it would be like having a contradictory belief. It's
No,
like
I
saying,
understand. I
right. So
understand.
the
I mean,
point
I guess
is,
I think my where I land and where Biscuit lands is similar because I'm also sort of a mystic, which just means that like I'm not compelled to only take the philosophical avenue to kind of explain how I think things work, right, and how the mystical kind of tradition, in some ways, stands opposed to the rational one, right?
In what way?
Sort of
well,
explicitly.
In what
yeah,
way?
yeah. Well, no, well, I don't want to, what is it called? You get off topic. I was just saying that given that God is also omnipotent, he could do anything like logically possible, right? So if you think that morality is grounded in God's nature, right, and what determines whether something is sinful or not is either you have some kind of Aristotelian view where it's the purposes of creatures, right? If they fail um to act on their God-given purpose, that they are sinning, or if you think that sin is just something that God doesn't desire, right, or something that God commands you not to do because with the intention of um having you not do it, right? Um, what you end up having is that, so God has a desire that there be no sin, right? Or he has a desire that all creatures fulfill their purpose, right? Since that's what they're intended for, right? He made them with a particular end in mind, right? So he has a particular desire for them, right? And when I say desire, you could think of it like analogically. It doesn't have to be like a human
No, I
desire. It could
understand. I
just,
understand because
right.
no, that's helpful. I don't have
And
my God. My God isn't personal either. So like, desire is just a metaphor. I get you.
right. And so what would the point is he has some kind of commitment, right? because without some kind of commitment, you can't really be an agent, right? And so, given God is an agent, right, you have to be an agent to be rational. Um, he would have some kind of commitment, and in this case, he would have a commitment since he desires that there shouldn't be sin to prevent sin, right, or to have creatures fulfill their purposes, or to have them follow his commands, whatever the case may be, right?
Maybe what he desires
And
is people have free will.
Yeah,
well,
but what is
I'll get to the free will. I'll
wait,
get to the free
hang
will.
on, John, can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah.
What's the kind of like, if God doesn't create the world and therefore max um, manifests this desire to not have sin by not creating, isn't that somehow different behavior than creating sin and then having a mechanism to remove the sin? Isn't it better to like, I just don't understand. The not creating is not doing anything. In other words, God would even have to like think, as it were, hey, there's this thing in the world that's kind of this thought, even in God's thought, as it were, right? Is hey, I don't want this thing that doesn't exist yet to be in the world, so I'm just not going to make it, right? So I guess the question
Well,
is what when we have, because we have the world that we have, right? What, let's reverse engineer it. How can it be that in this world, God is manifesting God's moral nature by producing it with sin and suffering and evil? I mean, that's back to the problem of evil, right? What does it mean that there's evil? And I guess I come to, it's incomprehensible in a world that never had it. In other words, the world that had evil and then removed evil is somehow essentially different than the world that never had evil in it to begin with.
yeah, but I'm saying, given God as a rational agent, he would have a hypothetical imperative that he would always be in accord with, right, to prevent the existence of sin, right, or to make to have all creatures fulfill the purpose that he intended, right?
So could you address the free will then? Maybe he wants
Yeah,
people.
I'll address it, but I just want to emphasize this point because if you say something like, "Well, what if he desired forgiveness or whatever?" The idea is that if he desires there be forgiveness, right, and it's constitutive of there being forgiveness, that there's um sin in the world, right? Then what follows is that he also has to um desire to create sin. He has to make creatures with the purpose of committing sin so that
Yes,
they would be forgiven, right?
yes,
But if
yes.
right, but if what we said before about sin is correct, that it's something that ultimately God doesn't desire, right? Because he has a hypothetical imperative to prevent it, right? Because it implies creatures going against their God-given uh, purpose, right? Or not following his commands, right? Then the idea is that actually this scenario becomes incoherent because if God wants there to be forgiveness, right? Um, then presumably he wants there to be a world where there is sin, right? He creates creatures with the intended purpose that they would sin, right? And so the end result is that actually there is no sin at the end because God intended